Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Live. There's not a lot to talk about when it comes to bipartisanship these days, but the House just approved overwhelmingly an extension to the Paycheck Protection Program that gives aid to small businesses by a vote of 415 to 3. That extension will move back the deadline for a lot of businesses filing from March 31st to May 31st to especially give help to some of those smaller businesses with fewer than 20 employees trying to navigate all this. We've known how tricky it can be for some people out there. And for more on that, I want to bring on our next guest, Jill Castilla, Citizens Bank of Edmond CEO and president, who teamed up with Shark Tank's Mark Cuban to found PPP.bank to help people file last year through all this. And Jill, I mean, I guess it kind of speaks to the trickiness for some people navigating this for the first time in terms of really tapping a government program to weather a pandemic like this. Talk to me about how important this extension is in your mind to kind of help ease the process again.
Well, last year when the CARES Act was passed, we had so many small businesses that were Schedule C filers that attempted to get aid because we were promoting as being something very accessible for independent contractors, for those Uber drivers, those sole proprietors. And when they applied, they found out they weren't qualified because the rules were clarified and changed to make it where it was net income versus gross revenue to determine how much you qualify for. Well, with that door kind of slammed on those small businesses, they went and looked and tried to find aid in other capacities and thought PPP wasn't for them. When now with the Biden administration making this change, where with Schedule C filers can now use gross revenue, these smallest employers, we really need to a huge effort to get the word out to them that they know that this program now is available to them, even though they may have previously been aware of it but were declined. Now they may have more funds available to them, which is super important. So this extended time frame will allow us to get that word out. They're also, these smaller employers don't have a CPA on staff, so they need some additional time, some additional help. Bankers need times to work with them so that we can ensure that they really understand the process appropriately. It would also be great if we could retroactively help those that did qualify for some funds using the net income calculation. But now that these smallest employers that maybe previously got PPP funds, it gives us some time to hopefully retroactively create a fix for them where they can apply with the gross income number, getting more funds available to these small employers.
Jill, give me a sense of where these small businesses stand right now, a year into the pandemic. We heard so much from some of these businesses who did get the PPP, who said it did, in fact, help them stay open. And yet you're talking about so many other businesses that lost out that are just now trying to get additional funding.
That's right. Yeah, there's so many that are just barely hanging on, that they don't have access to unemployment insurance. They don't have an employer that's continuing their pay program. And these are, the housekeepers of the world, the Uber drivers, these super small business owners that are reliant upon their own income that haven't received really the aid to help them sustain. So this is incredibly impactful for them. And they're also not included in those typical unemployment numbers that you see. So we may see a rebound in those numbers, but we still see, and I get these messages day after day, hundreds a day of super small business owners, these independent contractors, sole proprietors that need access to some type of assistance that just don't have it with the current tools that are available.
What would you say about maybe the process and the way that this could have been rolled out, thinking back to the beginning of the pandemic? Obviously, if we're discussing how smaller businesses without CPAs might struggle with this, on the flip side, there was a lot of outrage at first for some big publicly traded companies that were tapping PPP dollars before they gave that back after public outcry. I mean, if you could maybe go back and give advice on how to make this program better, was it too hard from the outset?
The program was just exceptional and how fast it went out and the funds that were deployed so quickly. When there was a revision made to clarify how Schedule C was treated, that's what really tripped us up with these very small employers. What also happens is the complexity for these very small loans. These loans are $1,000, $2,000 are really were the same as the higher dollar loans with someone that maybe has more access to CPAs and legal assistance. So if we could have simplified earlier, if we could have created where it was gross revenue versus net income, that would have helped out in such an extraordinary way. I think from a banking perspective, it takes me a lot longer with those smaller loans than it does for the larger loans. So you see banks and some of the larger ones not participating as much with the smaller guys because it's so intensive in your help with them. And we've been really fortunate that there's a lot of independent CPAs and tax advisors that have been great at volunteering to help. And I think we can mobilize and promoted those resources earlier so that small business knew who they could turn to. It's not too late to help.
Jill, I wonder, away from the PPP, when you look at how stimulus has been rolled out as a whole over the last year, what that says about just how outdated the technology, the process of all of this. You of course teamed up with Mark Cuban to develop this technology to streamline the process. We had a guest on a few weeks ago who said, look, if we had a digital dollar, for example, things would be much more immediate. How are you looking at the cracks in the system right now, and what needs to be addressed for a future crisis?
Yeah, there could have been such a great utilization of fintech during this crisis. We've created PPP.bank, which was a guided PPP forgiveness tool with Mark Cuban and Tesla our software. And from the time the application came available to when we deployed that website was 10 days. So it's not difficult to get this, to deploy this type of technology. It's not highly complex. It's not expensive. In fact, we all did this, just donated our services. But I think it's just getting technologists in the room to figure out how can we simplify to make something easier. And I think the focus is really on the expeditiousness of the information getting out and getting the forms out to bankers and letting bankers come up with the technology or the fintech themselves. But the small businesses weren't getting equal access to that type of technology, and it made it that much more intimidating for it. So I think just getting technologists in the room, bankers, that are at the front line, these small banker. I have a one location bank, 300 million in assets. Getting someone like me and I have thousands of peers that are on the front lines working with these small businesses, knowing where the speed bumps are and where there's barriers to credit. I do think it's not even looking for next crisis. It's really showcase the barriers of credit that smaller businesses, that lower income, the minority business owners really have in everyday life. And we need to make it easier for them to have accessibility to credit. And I think technology can really assist with that, as well as activating this army of volunteers around the country that love small businesses, want to ensure their success, and even outside the crisis are willing to help.
Certainly hoping that small businesses who haven't gotten the loans yet will get it this time around. Jill Castilla, it's good to talk to you today, CEO and president of Citizens Bank of Edmond.